Hello, everyone, and welcome to the This is Bitcoin podcast, where I, Bitcoin Gandalf, speak to Bitcoiners about privacy, technology, security, self-sovereignty, and building in Bitcoin. Today, I have the honor and pleasure of speaking with Bitcoin Q&A. Bitcoin Q&A is a Bitcoin privacy and FOSS advocate. He's also the creator of the amazing Bitcoin resources website, Bitcoiner.Guide, where you can find information on all sorts of cool Bitcoin stuff like wallets, nodes, privacy guides, and a lot more. In today's episode, we discussed Bitcoin Q&A's journey to Bitcoin, building Bitcoiner.Guide, how to give back and help FOSS Bitcoin projects, privacy, wallets, UTXO management, CoinJoins, and nodes. Following the recording of this podcast, I decided that I wanted to give back to him for all his work and simultaneously encourage more people to participate in the Podcasting 2.0 standard. I told Bitcoin Q&A that I was going to match all sats streamed to the podcast for the month of December up to 200,000 Satoshis and donate those to his project, Bitcoiner.Guide. Bitcoin Q&A, being the humble and generous person that he is, asked me if I would consider instead donating the sats to Ronin Dojo, a project to which he has contributed and which is near and dear to his heart. So of course I agreed. So the This is Bitcoin podcast is going to match every sat received from listeners up to 200,000 sats. So that means if I receive 200,000 sats, I'll match every one of those sats. So we'll have 400,000 sats in total, and those will be donated to the Run in Dojo project. Now, in order to make this happen, what you have to do is download a Podcasting 2.0 enabled podcasting app, such as a Fountain app, or I believe you can also use Breeze or Sphinx Chat, and stream Satoshis to the podcast while you listen. I'll know that I'm receiving those podcasts from listeners of this particular episode, and then I will match every sat received via streaming of this episode in December up to 200,000, and I will donate those to Run and Dojo. I'll figure out how I can share how much of those sats have come in and then share the donations, because I haven't actually used Breeze or Sphinx Chat yet, so I'm not familiar with how to use those apps, but I do know how to use Fountain, and I'm all set up on that. But anyway, you guys just take care of listening and streaming, and then I will post how many sats have been received and my matching donation at the beginning of January. My thanks to Bitcoin Q&A for the time spent on this podcast, and thank you all for listening. See you on the next one. Bitcoin Q&A, welcome to the show.
Hey Gandalf, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on, and looking forward to. I've got a super strong black coffee in hand. Somewhat sleep deprived last night, but looking forward to digging into a decent conversation with you.
Fantastic. No, I really appreciate you making the time, and to someone like me, and I'm sure to many other people, you're a sort of a legend in the Bitcoin educational space. I remember when I first joined Bitcoin Twitter, you were definitely one of the people that I saw always answering questions, and then I saw your Bitcoiner.Guide. So just want to say thanks for everything you've done for Bitcoin and for educating people. It's really fantastic, and it's an honor to speak to you. I want to kick things off just by asking you to give us some background on how you got into Bitcoin, and particularly, what was the path that led you to becoming focused or interested in the sort of the privacy, self-sovereignty, and tech aspects of Bitcoin? Because I feel like usually people come in and they're obsessed with number go up and the economics of it, but you seem to really be focused on this other side.
Yeah, definitely. So I will caveat this with, yes, I never ever talk about number go up, probably just because everybody else does it for me, and I don't see, there isn't exactly a gap in the market for me to feel a need to talk about that. But yeah, to rewind back to my rabbit hole story, is fairly sort of typical, I would say, to sort of somewhat similar to a lot of people that I speak to. So round about I got in at the big hype bubble, into the and I shudder a little bit to say this, but into the crypto space at the back end of 2017. Started out watching some god awful YouTube videos. Basically, I heard about it from somebody at work. Started watching YouTube videos about Litecoin. For some unknown reason, I got really, really into Litecoin, probably because of the people I was following on YouTube. So I continued to buy Charlie Lee's, who is the founder of Litecoin, to buy his bags as he slowly offloaded them. So thanks for that, Charlie. So continue to do that throughout the course of 2018. Dabbled in some other coins that will probably best to remain nameless. Let's just say they're not Bitcoin. Lost what is an uncomfortable amount of money. So I very much sort of touched the stove in 2018. Got sucked in by all of the marketing speak, the buzzwords. But then slowly, and I'm not sure what the tipping point was. I just started to, I'd imagine it probably was some of the podcasts that are still in the space now. So obviously the guys at TFTC and Stefan Livera, I just kind of stumbled across their podcasts, which are obviously Bitcoin focused. Stumbled across Andreas Antonopoulos on YouTube, as most people do somewhere along their Bitcoin journey. So obviously there's the sort of culmination of those three resources. I just sort of kept finding myself going back to them. And as time went on, I just sort of gravitated slowly towards, the things that the people who were far more experienced in Bitcoin than me were kept repeating. They were Bitcoin only, nothing else mattered. And at first I was like, that just seems like somebody with a one-track mind that's not sort of open-minded. Eventually it stuck, and I obviously clearly now share the same sort of mantra. Unfortunately, it took me until nearly midway through 2019 before I took the plunge and bought my first sats. I'm one of these people that likes to learn about something as much as I can. I learned my lesson with the shit coins, unfortunately. So I was a bit more apprehensive before diving into Bitcoin financially. Bought my first sats in 2019, and then ever since it's been a quest for to learn more and more about the protocol, how it works. That's the kind of bit that sort of that makes me tick in terms of from a Bitcoin perspective. Number go up's great, but I just understanding the nuts and bolts of how a wallet works, how a node works, what is the best security approach, that sort of stuff. It was the sort of circles that I found myself spending more and more time in, particularly on Telegram. There's many great communities in Telegram, which again, to cap off the final part of your question around privacy, was I just found myself spending a lot of time in the Samurai Wallet Telegram room and the surrounding rooms that kind of spin off from that. Obviously, being a privacy-focused wallet, as Samurai Wallet is, it attracts privacy-focused people. And then I just started to soak up all of the information that all of these people who are far cleverer than I am were being kind enough to pass on a day-to-day basis, even if it wasn't directly to me. They were giving advice to somebody else in the room. I was, this was back when I was in my 9-to-5 fiat job, probably doing a little less work than I should have done, scrolling through Twitter and Instagram, just sort of trying to soak up as much information as possible. So that's kind of how I got into the space. And then I'm sure we could probably get into later about where that took me from then on, in terms of starting to want to give back to the community and create, various different websites and guides and try and contribute as a absolutely non-technical user coming into this space. My personal background couldn't be any further from IT or computers, and neither could my career either. So I very much live in proof that, if a high school dropout idiot like me can sort of get a loose understanding of the nuts and bolts of this space, then I firmly believe that anybody that's willing to spend a bit of time can do the same.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the part I found really incredible about that story is that you went from presumably the Litecoin, like when you got interested in shitcoins, it was for number go up technology, not for actual tech, right? It wasn't like, oh, Litecoin's so well designed or something. But that the fact that you jumped from that to getting interested in and to somebody who's perhaps not techie and doesn't understand the tech side of Bitcoin and the privacy and stuff, they would look to you as like an authority who knows a lot about it. And my impression was like, you must have a tech background. But as you just shared, you absolutely don't. So is there something about your personality, about your past that like, have you been interested in tech generally outside of like being techie or your career?
I guess I had a very sort of light interest in sort of, again, using air quotes here with tech. I was always a bit of an Apple fanboy. I used to have like the latest MacBook, always used to keep up to date with the latest iPhone, used to have things like a Ring doorbell or smart light bulbs because at the time when they first came out, I thought they were cool, and they were kind of cutting edge at the time. So I sort of dabbled in that sort of stuff, but they that kind of tech isn't, it's mainstream, isn't it? It's not, you don't need to be technical to use it. So that's kind of as far as it went, really. And circle back sort of more than 4 years ago, I had never even heard of Linux. I didn't know, I thought a Raspberry Pi was something that you had after your Sunday roast. So yeah, some people genuinely don't believe me when I say this because, but they come to me with questions that could go completely over my head because they get this impression that, because I focus more on the technical side of Bitcoin, that I'm some like shadowy supercoder that sits in an office all day with 19 screens and it looking like the Matrix. But it couldn't be further from the truth, really.
Yeah, amazing. I'm astounded by that because that was definitely my impression. I would have thought that at least you had some background from your like fiat life that was techie, just because of number one, how interested you are in the tech, and number two, how well you appear to understand it. At least like you say, like if somebody with a Bitcoin coding tech background might ask you questions that like go over your head, but to the untrained eye, you would not be able to tell that at all. And yeah, so you mentioned building like Bitcoiner.Guide and stuff. That was going to be my next question. Like, not being techie at all. First of all, I'd love to get into, because I'm trying to build a Bitcoin resources website. Not quite like Bitcoiner.Guide. I don't think I have the skills to cover that info, and you already do it so well. But like, I find it just incredibly hard to pick like how to build the website. I get overwhelmed by all these different options. So it'd be awesome for those people that are looking to build their own, there's a lot of people that want to give back to the space. And I think creating a website where you curate some content or you share some of your own thoughts or what you know about Bitcoin is much needed. I don't think we can have too much of that. Because there's still so many people that know nothing about it, and each one of us has a social group that we can share stuff with. So like, how did you go about creating Bitcoiner.Guide, and what even drove you to doing it? Because presumably this, like a piece of work like that takes a lot of your time.
So Bitcoiner.Guide is actually the sort of second iteration of like a website that I've put out regarding with Bitcoin. So my pseudonym is Bitcoin Q&A. The original website that I created was bitcoinqa.com. So that was essentially designed to be, as I was going through the learning process that I'm sure loads of people listening to this are doing right now. I was thinking, well, there's loads of, at the time there was quite a lot of, nowhere near as much as there is now, but there was a fair few Bitcoin resources that were great. They were really thorough, but there was nothing that had just some simple, to the point, like a list of questions. The idea behind my website was a list of simple questions and answers, hence Bitcoin Q&A, of the most common stuff. So, if I want to learn about wallets, I don't want to read like a 10-minute article on the intricacies of why Betch32 is important or something like that, because it's just going to switch newcomers off. So I set out to just create, okay, if you want to learn about wallets, here's a simple question and answers list about wallets, the most common ones. So I did it. I had different topics: wallets, nodes, common mistakes, common questions, things like that. I built that website on a service called Wix, which is probably, I'm sure you've probably heard of the service Wix, which is what it is, essentially just a drag and drop website builder for absolute non-technical people like me. It made it fairly simple. You just go on. It's all built around a framework where you can just drag and drop your pictures in, put your titles in, and then type in your content, and it makes it look really pretty without the need to have any massive amounts of technical knowledge. So I built it there. It stayed up. It looks nothing like my current website does now. It stayed up for probably over a year, I would say. Then as I sort of got a little bit more technically advanced, I suppose, and wanted to have a bit more sort of customization opportunity with the website, and to be able to, I actually wanted to move it off Wix. Turns out that you can't. If you build a website with Wix, you're stuck with Wix. So you're stuck with their hosting fees. You're stuck with their annual fee to keep the website live. It's not massive amounts of money, but if you ever wanted to literally just up and leave and take all your content with you and say deploy it on a WordPress website or deploy it manually, like I have, which I'll come on to in a sec, you can't do that. You're kind of locked in. It's very much a walled garden. It's a bit like Apple. So they draw you in. They made this website really, really easy to make and to construct, and it looks really pretty. But once you're in, you're stuck. So then I had the difficult decision of, I wanted to move my content away from, essentially, if Wix wanted to take me offline, they could do so at the click of a button, and that made me worry a little bit. My content's not exactly, controversial, but I just wanted to have that next level of sovereignty, I suppose. So I essentially had to recreate the website all over again elsewhere. So I spun up a virtual private server, which is essentially, it's still somebody else's computer, but you can sort of, you can purchase it anonymously. You can pay for it in Bitcoin, depending on the service that you use. And you've just got a lot more control over the content that you put there. You can build it, once you've got that sort of computer in the cloud, you can build that website using any number of different website tool builders. So I essentially had to recreate the website from scratch using a brand new tool, which took me a hell of a long time. But I guess that's a long roundabout way of saying that I just kind of wanted to increase my sovereignty and get outside of that walled garden, so that now I'm in a position where obviously the website's grown significantly in terms of the depth of content. So from the simple questions and answers, I've then added guides on privacy, multi-sig, nodes, wallets, Bitcoin backups, guides on no KYC, and various other things. So that's all hosted now at Bitcoiner.Guide. So does that somewhat answer your question? Or
yeah, no, that's great, and I can completely relate to the not wanting to use or understanding why something like Wix or Squarespace looks attractive at first, but like you said, they make it really easy for you to build a website, and then that's how they sort of get you to stick around, is because you can't just download your code and take it somewhere else and deploy it somewhere else. You have to stick with them. You have to pay them. You can only host your website with Squarespace or Wix or any of these other services. And I often find even though the drag and drop builders are quite easy, depending on the level of customization, and this is something that you shared, when you wanted to customize the website more, you felt like you had to go elsewhere. Depending on the level of customization, it's actually almost as difficult to use that, or it's not possible to customize to the level using a Squarespace as it is something that's like open source or learning a little bit of HTML, CSS, or Markdown or whatever it is that you go on to use. So yeah. So, and I understand we've spoken before about this. So your Bitcoiner.Guide now is it a GitHub page?
So it was initially so again I'm going to keep harping on about it, but as a non-programmer and a non-technical user, I went onto GitHub and started hearing people were telling me about a little sort of quote unquote simple to use website builder that you can use with GitHub pages, and the tool's called Jekyll, which is like a bunch of code that kind of you can just throw your content at it in a simple, like you just alluded to, Markdown format, which is essentially it's very similar to just like a basic text editor. There are some very, very simple sort of codes in terms of like how you can implement a hyperlink and things like that. But for all intents and purposes, it's just a text editor. You can throw your text and your images at that, click a button, and it'll kind of build a website for you using the theme that you sort of choose. So I went onto GitHub, having heard about this, found a theme that I liked the look of. I forked that repository, which basically means I sort of created a copy of it. It was, it was completely open source. I wasn't like breaking any copyright or infringement laws. So I just forked it, made my own copy of it. And then from there, I smashed my head against the keyboard for a couple of weeks to try and figure out how I could, say, change the color of the hyperlink. So instead of when I put my mouse over them and it be blue, I want it to be orange. Instead of the header saying, the name of the theme, I want it to say Bitcoiner.Guide. That was a massive learning experience for me in terms of how basic websites work underneath the hood, in terms of, it's actually nowhere near as difficult as you think. And there's not, you can customize a website quite a lot by changing very few things in the theme and in the background. So yeah, I just basically essentially just took a copy of somebody else's theme and just slowly over time just changed the theme so that it looks basically what you see today at Bitcoiner.Guide. So it's got the Bitcoin orange hyperlinks. It's a fairly simple website, but I think that's part of its charm, is that it's kind of a no frills sort of place where you can just go, if you've got a spare 10 minutes and you'd pick a Bitcoin topic and you want to learn about that, and you can, there's no, it's not sort of a really fancy website. It's very basic in the background as well. But it's got all the information that you need, hopefully. I'm going to continue to build upon it. So that was a big learning experience for me, in terms of like, the absolute very basics of web development. But again, I'll say it again, if a numpty like me can do it, then I'm a firm believer that anybody can. Yeah,
I mean, I think so. A lot of us that are in this space and interested in this particular area of Bitcoin, I think we are also tinkerers. So whilst like anyone can learn things, I do think it also, like you've just alluded to, it wasn't just like, one day you spent a couple of hours one afternoon and you and you made this amazing website. Like you do have to like put in a considerable amount of time and deal with some, at least at the beginning, like a steep learning curve. But I think the main thing for people to realize is that it is possible. And yes, it takes some effort, but it's nowhere near as hard as some people might think it is. I think you're a brilliant example, and I encourage anyone to go and check out Bitcoiner.Guide, because the website, the fact that I actually love the fact that it's simple. If you start getting all fancy, with lots of images and like animations and stuff, it just makes it a lot harder to upkeep the website. And that does make the learning curve perhaps so steep that somebody who's not that technical or isn't like doing this full time, where they might drop off because it's just too hard. So keeping it simple is good for the user going on the website, makes it easy to navigate, easy to find information, and makes it easy for you as the builder to build it in the first place and then to upkeep it without having to like spend your entire life figuring out all this complicated stuff, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing as well is that and it's kind of ties into the sort of free and open source ethos and ideology of Bitcoin as well, is that, I got started by creating a fork of somebody else's website repository, used their theme, changed it. If I'll send you the link after this to the one it's almost unrecognizable to the actual theme itself, but it gave me a great starting block. Well, there's actually, a couple of websites that a couple of Bitcoiners that I speak to now are in the process of building that have actually done the same, but with my website. So it's kind of gone full circle where I sort of created a copy of somebody else's and then made it, look at how you see it today. And then, there's other people now that are kind of, I guess, standing on my shoulders to use my sort of template so that they can change it to suit them, and so that they can put out their own content and hopefully that sort of trend continues. Like you say, you're looking to do one as well. And I think, there's never, ever going to be too many resources about Bitcoin, because for 95% of the population, even the most simple concept of, how a Bitcoin transaction works is when you're first coming into the space is absolutely mind boggling. So the more content that we've got out there, the better for me.
Agreed. And yeah, I think that's amazing that people are sort of forking a fork of a fork. And that building off, standing on your shoulders. And that's definitely something I'm going to do. You very kindly brought to my attention that what you did, and that I can do the same with Bitcoiner.Guide. And I really like the at least like the general look of it. Obviously, we don't want to have something that's exactly the same, but it's a great starting framework. I'm looking forward to doing that. I've got some experience already using Markdown from another website builder that I used before. So hopefully the learning curve won't be too steep, but I don't know. Do you have to use command line?
No, not at all.
No?
If especially if you were, so there's two ways you can do it. The way I started out is that you can do this on GitHub pages. So you'll have your own repository. It'll have all of the basic files in it, including the website builder, which you don't necessarily need to touch. All you need to do is, you create a new page to say wallets or, podcasts or whatever, create your Markdown file. Once you save that on GitHub, it automatically in the background creates all the files, and then it will serve it at the URL that it will give you a default URL, and obviously you're free to change that if you want as well. You visit the website and your website's there, it's published.
That's awesome.
That's the easy way, and that's how I started to do it. And then as I went a little bit more tinfoil hat, I was thinking, well, I'm using GitHub, which is great, it's out in the open. It's, I've got my own local copy of it as well, but GitHub could still take me offline if they wanted to. So I kind of took all those files offline, and now I do the exact same process, but I just build it locally on my laptop, and then I just send the files up once I've used the sort of run command. So there is one single command the way I do it. It basically just says Jekyll build, which basically says I've made the changes to my content. Go and build the website for me. It'll spit out a load of files, and all I do is just send them to my virtual private server, which is a drag and drop exercise, and that's it. My website's updated. But if you're doing the GitHub way, it's even easier. Like I say, it's just change the content, press save, job done.
Yeah, awesome. I think I have my own. Well, I don't host like locally on a machine. I pay for a hosting service, but I guess they could also take me offline to the ultimate self-sovereign way would be you have a sort of computer running 24/7 at home that is your host for the website, right?
Yes, that's the absolute best way. The problem is then you run into privacy issues in terms of, if I was to host the actual Bitcoiner.Guide at my house and I wasn't to do some fancy networking stuff, then people will be able to see my IP address and from that see my rough location of where I live, which is obviously not desirable for a privacy advocate. So which is why currently I'm still hosting it on a virtual private server so that I don't need to worry about my IP address being exposed. I do, however, host a Tor website, which is a carbon copy of Bitcoiner.Guide. Obviously, it's just a .onion URL. That is actually hosted on a Raspberry Pi that is sat next to me right now. So obviously, not many people are going to visit it via Tor. Depending on your country or your jurisdiction, maybe you might want to not reveal to your internet service provider that you're visiting Bitcoin websites. But I just did that as a sort of exercise to prove to myself that I could do it, but just also, I guess I can kind of claim that I am self-hosting my website from home, albeit just the Tor version.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, that is an astounding amount of, even though you're playing it down a little bit, saying you're not that techie and whatever. That is an if you count like not only the Bitcoin stuff, but also the fact that you've learned how to build this website, and that is an astounding amount of stuff to have learned in, say, 2 and a bit years since you got into Bitcoin. Presumably all this website stuff was after you got into Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, never touched anything like that beforehand. So maybe I am playing it down. You know, don't get me wrong. The website is the product of hundreds and hundreds of hours in my spare time, in and around weekends and after work when I was back at my 9-to-5 job. So yeah, I've dedicated a shit ton of time to get to where I am today to learn. But again, I stood on the shoulders of other people. You know, I wouldn't have even known that Jekyll Website Builder existed if another Bitcoiner hadn't told me about it. I wouldn't have even known that it was possible to host the Tor version of my website on a Raspberry Pi at home if somebody else hadn't written a guide on it. So I'm just, you know, a very small pawn on a very big chessboard, if you like. That, you know, I've been a sponge in terms of loads. You know, I've soaked up loads of information from other people that have been really, really kind to me to help me learn about Bitcoin, websites, privacy, etc., etc. So I'm just kind of trying to help pay that forward again by helping other people do the same, I guess. Yeah,
I mean that kind of stuff like shines a light on your excuse me, on your personality qualities. Like, number one, you're able to appreciate what others have done for you and what you've gained from others' work, and then like you're showing your appreciation by paying that forward. And I think that's awesome. And I think even though, again, there's a little bit of play down, I think where I'm approaching all of this from is like, we want people to be using Bitcoin more privately because it has certain benefits, and we want people to like self-custody, and we want them to run their own nodes for all this variety of reasons that we'll get into. But I'm concerned that if we think that we're sort of, I won't put myself in this camp, but if we think like the kind of people who are doing this now are normal and that most people are going to do all this work, I don't think that is the case, because they would otherwise already be doing it. Not to say that some people who aren't can't get into it and start, just like you or me or many other people. But I think if we want like mass adoption of Bitcoin and for it to be used in a way that is private and self-sovereign, all these things need to, a lot of the stuff needs to be abstracted away, so the user isn't doing, isn't spending 200 or 300 hours on figuring out how to do it. It's more of like a click of a button. And so I think that's something, because in a lot of podcasts I've listened to about self-sovereign, using Bitcoin in a self-sovereign way or privacy, I think we hammer away at all the benefits, but there isn't a lot of focus on the costs of it. And like, I've recently tried to switch from Windows to Linux, and just the amount of hours I had to spend reading about different distros and like all these issues. And then I just don't think that a lot of other people are going to spend that time. I mean, I just saw a video on Twitter shared by MicroChad, where it seems like people in Sweden are now putting like NFC chips into their skin to have their Vax passports on them. And that's ultimately like a convenience thing, right? They want to go out, they want to be able to go to restaurants or bars, and if you need to show a Vax passport, I mean, they're willing to like go from something that's as easy as scanning a QR code. Now, I'm not saying I agree with this, but I'm saying it's very easy to scan a QR code Vax pass on your phone or whatever, but convenience like is so highly valued that people are like willing to skip, they'd rather skip the step of like unlocking their phone and showing the QR code and put a chip in their skin. It seems crazy to me, but that's the sort of world it seems that we live in, right?
Yeah, well, the whole VaxPass thing, I'm sure we share the same thoughts, but the thought of not only caving into that sort of social pressure, but also to embed something into your skin to be able to go to a restaurant is absolutely just mind-boggling to me. I actually saw that tweet as well before we came on. I like to take stuff like that with a pinch of salt. This is the internet and it is Twitter. So
yeah,
I'm just kind of maybe somewhat ignorant or just hopeful that stuff like that doesn't actually come to light. But to bring it back to the whole convenience piece, yeah, you're absolutely right. That, there's a reason that Apple is one of the most valuable companies on the planet. They make beautiful products that are easy to use. So it's not really a surprise that they, make so much money each year and that they've got so much reach across the globe. So to tie that into Bitcoin, I think it's just another reminder of, and I hate using this term because it makes me cringe a little bit, but it is true. We are really, really early. The space is moving at breakneck pace in terms of the infrastructure that's being built around Bitcoin. Even the difference in the availability and the functionality of the different wallets from today to even when I got in, only a couple of years ago. I'm not exactly an OG or anything like that. It's night and day. We've gone from basically you used Electrum and that was it, to having wonderful tools like Sparrow and Spectre that provide all this functionality. And, you can create a multi-sig wallet in like 10 or 15 minutes, all through a beautiful graphical user interface. That didn't exist just a couple of years ago. So, another example is Nodes. The Umbrella project hasn't been around all that long, but there's a reason that their following and their user base has absolutely exploded. That's because they've, arguably made the easiest experience to onboard. I don't think there's many more steps to setting up your own DIY node that can be removed from the process that due to the, compared to the approach that they've taken. So I think we are getting there. We've just got to continue to ride that wave. The user experience is coming on a long way. And with that, obviously, we'll bring more and more people because the barrier to entry is just getting lower and lower and lower. We've just got to wait for that to kind of get to that tipping point, really. I think there will be a Schelling point. Where like you alluded to, that the user experience has been abstracted away or polished enough so that any Tom, Dick, and Harry on the street can easily pick this stuff up and operate with at least some base level of sort of sovereignty, and hopefully doing so by holding their own keys at an absolute minimum.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I think one of the main things, I guess, to get people to realize what they might be giving up when they go, because I feel like the trade-off is often like, privacy and self-sovereignty versus convenience. So the day that we can make using Bitcoin privately and just general privacy, like on the internet, more convenient than not being private, that's when we win. I'm not sure that just the incentives of being self-sovereign and private when the convenience factor isn't tied along with it is enough, or that's what it seems like at the moment. So I struggle personally to see how that happens, but obviously there's much smarter people than me working on making privacy focused stuff and self-sovereign focused tech and ways to interact with Bitcoin that are hopefully going to be more convenient than the opposite, than the non-private, non-sovereign ways. I don't know if you have any insights or any thoughts on that.
Yeah, the tools, like you said, are being built. 2 years ago, coordinating a CoinJoin on your mobile phone was a really wacky concept. That's a reality today with Samurai Wallet. If you can send some Bitcoin into your Android phone wallet and in a couple of taps have done your first CoinJoin, you don't need your own node. It's advisable, but it's not a requirement. So within the space of like 15 minutes, you could have some private Bitcoin that's been through a first CoinJoin, and all you need is an Android phone that you can buy for like $50. You don't need a fancy phone to be able to do that. So and couple that with some of the spending tools that they've got within the wallet as well. The default spend is a privacy preserving spend, and it's called Stonewall. The technicalities of which are probably kind of outside of the sort of needs of this podcast, but the default spend with a Samurai is a privacy preserving spend. So we are edging closer towards that being the default. So if you use a wallet with the right tools in it, like a Samurai wallet, the defaults are set up that the guide rails are really high, so that if you wanted to be somewhat private, then you can do so by default without taking very many extra steps. So I think that trend's going to continue as well. But like I say, we are early. We've just got to wait for those tools to be built out. And I think that's why you see people, I tried to do it myself, but you see people, prominent Bitcoiners in the space, like Matt Odell, that are really pushing for people to contribute towards free and open source software. And whether that's financially or if you're technically based, you can, contribute through documentation or by even contributing to the code. If you're way deep down the rabbit hole, it's within our gift to, as sort of Bitcoiners who are more entrenched in this space, to help push these sorts of tools forward. And I would urge, anybody listening to this that sounds like that could be them, just, reach out to your favorite project and see if there's anything you can help with. Most of these projects don't have a readily available income stream. They're crying out for translations. They are looking for people to help in their community groups. They're looking for feedback on their user experience. There's a multitude of ways that even the least technical user can contribute back to free and open source software, which, if we had more people doing so, we would get to that utopia much quicker than the current trajectory.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if we want to continue to have open source software, potentially free open source software, we all have to do our bit, because we can't really expect a handful of people to do everything and us get like the best software all for free. You have to take personal, if you want to act in a self-sovereign way, you also have to take personal responsibility for helping to make that happen. Whereas something that's closed source or for profit or whatever, they have different incentives that lead them to be able to build stuff. I guess the open source ethos is, a lot of it is like community, community giving back to the project or contributing to the project, right?
Definitely, which unfortunately it's if history repeats itself, it's not that sustainable a model. There's been many a free and open source piece of software that's slowly just withered into the shadows, unfortunately, through lack of funding or lack of people focusing on it. So that's why it's, again, I think it's just really important that people show their support in any way that they can to build this thing forward. Because, if you're just a humble hodler that uses, a wallet and a hardware wallet, and you're quite happy to sit there and hopefully watch your Bitcoin stash grow in value, then, by contributing to open source software and the tools that you use and that are dear to your heart, are going to pay back in dividends in the long run. Because, the more people adopt this stuff, there's, as we all know, there's only a fixed amount of Bitcoin to go around. So the more people that we can bring into this space to get the benefit from this paradigm shift, the better. And I think we all have our own responsibility to do what we can to contribute.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. Well, I think Bitcoin opens a door for a way to fund free. It still needs funding, but for a way for the community to fund, or the users to fund free software, where, I'm sure you've heard of podcasting 2.0, like the value for value model, where you're streaming sats to your podcaster, or a podcast that you're listening to. A similar thing could be done with open source software, where the user can choose to stream sats to the to the builders or the makers of the project. I think what stopped those sorts of things from working within the fiat system or with the fiat rails is that like you can't send tiny amount, like very small amounts. It's not practical. You have to put in credit card information. It just, people don't do it, like doing a donation style model. Whereas I think a streaming sats version of this is just perhaps frictionless enough that more people might be willing to do it, and thereby getting some funding for people who are building free open source stuff. So that would be interesting if that develops, because the podcasting 2.0 thing seems to be gaining some good traction, which is amazing to see.
Yeah, it's a really great model. I kind of I'm just of the opinion that we're kind of in a weird phase of kind of Bitcoin history at the moment where it's really, really difficult to get people to part with their sats, and probably for good reason. Most people in the space have some even small expectation that their sats are going to increase in value, so that naturally makes them not want to part ways with them. So we're kind of in a catch-22 where people know that they should be contributing, but they're like, well, what's the opportunity cost of me, donating to that project, and then, Bitcoin does a 10x over the next couple of years. It's kind of a catch-22. I'm not sure what the easy answer is. Maybe it's UX, like you say. If speaking personally, if there's an easy way for me to contribute financially, like you say, through streaming sats, and it's really frictionless, I'm more likely to do it than if I've got to jump over a load of hurdles to, download this new piece of software, and then I've got to jump into the command line or something like that. It's if we can, well, I say we, look, I'm talking like I'm a developer. I'm not a developer, but if the people in the space can make that those tools easy to use and I suppose fun as well, if you can make it fun, like, example is the boost button on podcasting 2.0. If you can have nice little touches like that, again, it's just more likely to enable people to part ways with their precious hard-earned sats.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the one thing I have, so one of the arguments I have for people who say like, oh, I don't want to spend my sats is like, so what I was doing, I formerly lived in a place that had no capital gains tax. I understand in the UK it's a little bit different because if you part with sats, you might be liable to pay capital gains tax. But where I lived, there was no capital gains tax. So what I was doing is, for example, if I'd go out to dinner with friends and somebody picked up the bill and we were all then paying them back, I would offer to pay them in Bitcoin. And so what I would do is like, I'm spending this, whatever it is, 20 quid already on dinner. Why not just buy Bitcoin with it and pay in Bitcoin? Like I'm still spending £20 at the end of the day. How it leaves my pocket, whether it's as pounds or as Bitcoin, makes no difference to me, because that's not money that I was going to buy Bitcoin to hodl with anyway. And I think if people can get around the idea that you're going to live life, you're going to have to spend some money. Why not? It's better for you to pay it in Bitcoin than it is for you to pay it in fiat. That person might keep that Bitcoin or pay someone else in Bitcoin, and you're just sort of adding value to the network and making more people use Bitcoin rather than thinking, oh no, I have to I really think we have to use Bitcoin at the end of the day. I think it can be like a store of value, digital gold, and it can be a medium of exchange.
Completely agree. To your point on paying people back for the bills in sats, fantastic idea, and a really great way to orange people as well. Orange pill people, should I say? Really great way. So yeah, urge anybody listening to this to take that approach. And on your point about spending Bitcoin, I completely agree as well. It really annoys me when people, I understand the want to hodl, and for the vast majority of my stash, I do the same. It's obvious where this thing's going in the future, so it makes perfect sense. But I think we all should be open to the idea of parting ways with a small amount of our sats if it's to the right merchant, to the right vendor. I'll give you an example. If there's a vendor where, I'll use the shameless plug here that Foundation Devices, who I work for, full disclosure. If you know that there's a merchant like that accepts Bitcoin that has been very open and honest about the fact that they don't sell their Bitcoin for they pledged to hold it for a number of years, then you can sort of contribute to that circular economy. You can that could be your way of contributing. So rather than paying with your credit card, you can contribute. Well, I say contribute your sats. You're going to get a product for it at the end of the day as well. But by paying them in Bitcoin as well, you're sort of contributing towards that circular economy. So there's loads of different merchants out there that have pledged to do the same as well. So that's one thing that I always try to do, that if I'm buying some Bitcoin related merch or products, and I see that the merchant takes Bitcoin, I'll always pay in Bitcoin. Don't get me wrong, there's been some purchases that I've made that are significantly more expensive now than I would have been financially better off for holding the sat. But I can be safe in the knowledge that those merchants that I've made those purchases at are sort of true Bitcoin companies, and I've done my little part of contributing to the circular economy, because I think long term, for Bitcoin to be deemed a real true success, the circular economy is going to have to start to grow. And I think, again, we can all play our part in that by even if it's just one purchase a year to buy a node case from Crypto Cloaks or a hardware wallet from Foundation Devices. You can easily replace those sats, but you've equally contributed to the circular economy at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think the thinking about like, oh, this purchase has now cost me X amount in fiat because, Bitcoin's gone up in value. I think the only way you can avoid that is to not have spent any of the money, even if it was just fiat. You could have, for every fiat purchase you ever make, you could always say, if I had bought Bitcoin instead, I would have had this much money now. So the purchase still cost me, opportunity cost in Bitcoin, even if you didn't actually spend Bitcoin to acquire that product. So at the end of the day, like we've said, we have to buy stuff because we have to live, and life's not all about just like saving money to do nothing with it, unless you're gonna, you really just want to pass it on to your daughter's sons or your family or something later on. I think we have to live a little, and I'd rather, wherever possible, spend Bitcoin rather than spend fiat. I want to, so I still want to cover, nodes, wallets, custodying Bitcoin, privacy. But I think perhaps the best way to go through everything is, whilst I'm not brand new to Bitcoin, I'm brand new to using Bitcoin privately, running a node, the I have self-custodied for a while, but like getting into sort of different types of self-custody. So maybe what we can do to run through everything without taking up too much of your time is, let's like run this like a scenario where I'm basically telling you what's going on with me and what I want to achieve, and maybe you can give me some advice, and then anyone who's in a similar position to me will be able to take this information and use it for themselves. So one of the things I want to get into is like using Bitcoin in a more private way. So all the Bitcoin that I've ever acquired pretty much is KYC Bitcoin. So I've gone to an exchange, I've given them my details, they have probably a picture of my passport, like my address, and they know where I'm a resident of, they know my real name, and then they can see how much money, I've sent to the exchange and how much Bitcoin I've bought. So I understand like one of the ways I can do it is coin joining, but coin joining is only going to give me forward privacy. Is that right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So by forward-looking privacy, what we mean there is that, like you correctly said, if you bought on a regulated exchange like Coinbase or Cash App, they've got your personal information, and when you withdraw, they see the Bitcoin address that you withdraw to, presumably like a mobile wallet or your cold storage. So they can, Bitcoin has a transparent ledger. It doesn't take a genius to work out that Gandalf bought 1 million sats and he sent to that wallet is controlled by Gandalf. If from there you take part in a CoinJoin transaction, All a CoinJoin transaction is a collaborative transaction where you come together anonymously with other users. You sort of pull your pieces of Bitcoin together, and then you each get an output from that transaction where all of the outputs are absolutely identical. So the result is that on the output side of the transaction, everybody looks exactly the same. Yeah, I like to use the analogy of the crowd of people in V for Vendetta all wearing the masks. You can think of your post-mix UTXOs as analogous to that, where everybody looks absolutely identical. So Coinbase could follow you across the blockchain up to that CoinJoin transaction. After that transaction, they have a number of possibilities that might be you. But they can't say with any level of certainty which one of those outputs is yours. So that's the general premise of what a CoinJoin is, and why you might like to use it.
Sorry to interrupt. So not all is lost for someone like me who has sort of basically onboarded myself onto Bitcoin in the least private way possible.
In terms of being able to sort of prevent people tracking you on chain after that transaction, yeah, you're correct. Then they would find it difficult. The caveat to that is that obviously that CoinJoin transaction does not remove the KYC record that is held by the regulated exchange. So that regulated exchange still knows that who you are, where you live, how much Bitcoin you bought, when you bought it, and what address you sent it to. That's kind of all the information that they've got. So after the CoinJoin transaction, they know that the chances are you've still got that Bitcoin, but they have no idea where it is, what wallet it's held in, and which address it's held at. So you do get some benefit. And then I suppose if you wanted to take your privacy really, really seriously, the alternative option to that, which is not going to be palatable for most people, and I kind of understand why, is that instead of going through CoinJoin, you can go back to the exchange, you can sell your Bitcoin, and then you can purchase through a more private method. Now, obviously, there are some things to consider when doing that. Obviously, depending on your jurisdiction, you expose yourself to capital gains taxes because you've bought and sold. So if you've made any fiat gains, you're going to be liable to pay capital gains on that. The other thing worth considering as well is that once let's say you've sold, you take your tax bill if you haven't lost any money. Then you've got a big chunk of fiat that you need to deploy back into Bitcoin in a private manner. Now, doing that is getting much easier than it has been in years gone by. You can use peer-to-peer exchanges like BISC and HODL. If you're just doing small amounts, that's going to be pretty easy for you to do. But if, let's say, you had a good chunk of your life savings and you just sold back through the exchange and you're sat on $20,000, it's going to be fairly difficult for you to make a purchase of $20,000 on a peer-to-peer exchange because the liquidity is nowhere near what it is on a centralized exchange for obvious reasons. So you're going to have to start to make smaller purchases. And if Bitcoin does what Bitcoin likes to do and has a massive price run in that time period, then you're going to come out with less sats than than when you left the centralized exchange. So there's lots to consider. It kind of just depends how private and how far you want to take it. And I completely understand why the second option, most people don't find that very palatable, but it's absolutely the most private way to do that. So it kind of just depends how far you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of once you've already KYC'd yourself and it's fair for somebody who's looking into that to assume that you still hold Bitcoin, even though they won't be able to track it after you do a CoinJoin. That to me seems like it makes it sort of pointless to go back in. Well, I mean, because even if you sell your Bitcoin on a KYC exchange, then somebody might assume you don't have Bitcoin anymore, but the KYC aspect of they have your address and everything else is still there. It doesn't go away when you sell your Bitcoin on a KYC exchange, right?
Yeah, so you're still exposed to, let's say, Coinbase gets hacked and a list of all their customers' names and addresses gets hacked. Then if somebody on a darknet market that gets their hands on this, they can, they might want to pay you a visit because all they know is that you're a customer of Coinbase. They don't know necessarily how much you hold and if you still hold it, but it might be the impetus for them to come and pay you a visit. The other thing to consider as well is that if you don't sell back through the KYC exchange, but you've done a CoinJoin, so you've got sort of forward-looking privacy, nobody knows where that Bitcoin is held. So they can't say for certain that you've still got it. If a government passes a draconian law that says you're now not allowed to self-custody your Bitcoin, we'll let you... again, I'm using air quotes, we'll let you still have it, but you have to send it to this regulated exchange because we're having a crackdown and self-custody is now outlawed in your jurisdiction. It's going to be difficult for you to deny the fact that you've still got Bitcoin because you've got no proof of where it's gone. So if the government comes to you and says, we know that you bought Bitcoin from Coinbase at this date and time, we want you to send it to this regulated wallet that we're going to sort of control and be able to monitor. If you just turn around and say, oh, well, I haven't got it anymore, I spent it or I lost it, they'll go, all right, well, have you got the proof? Show me where you spent it, or show me, if you've lost it and it's part of your life savings, I presume there's going to be a police report for that, surely. It's a significant amount of money. Obviously, if you're lying and you have neither of those things, then you're going to have a pretty hard time to convince them that you don't actually own any Bitcoin. So I realize that might sound very, very tinfoil hat to some people, but we are Bitcoiners, and as a privacy advocate, I sort of hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So I like to kind of shine a light on some of these potential scenarios, no matter how outlandish they might seem to some people.
Yeah, so this is what I've experienced, which is I feel like the whilst privacy can be a spectrum. Well, it is, I guess, a spectrum because you are able to have different levels of privacy. In practical terms, in a worst case scenario, there's only really full privacy that's going to protect you. Like any sort of half attempt at privacy, like you say, where you've done a CoinJoin, but you don't have proof that you no longer own the Bitcoin, in a scenario where like somebody's coming to, a 6102 attack, I think that's what they're called, when they confiscate the Bitcoin, or they're saying you have to hold it in a custodial way, you can't self-custody anymore. Like, you're not going to be able to avoid that worst case scenario unless you've gone the full hog on privacy, which then makes me think, well, then why bother even doing a slight amount of privacy if in the worst case scenario, what is it going to protect me from, basically, if I just go, if I just start coin joining now? Because there is also a cost to coin joining, right? I'm paying fees, or it costs me sats to coin join. Is that right?
Yeah, there's fees involved. They're not massive. I will give an example of the CoinJoin implementation that called Whirlpool, which is created by the Samurai Wallet team. Their fees, they work on what's known as a sort of a flat fee system, basically, where there are 4 different liquidity pools that you can mix your Bitcoin in. The smallest one is 100,000 sats. The cost to enter that pool is 5,000 sats. So it's almost negligible. It's if you just want to try this out, you can throw in 150,000 sats. They'll or just a little bit over 100,000 sats. They'll take a 5,000 sat fee. You'll pay a small amount of miner fees, as you would with any Bitcoin transaction. But you can absolutely get started with trying out this tech for a couple of dollars worth of Bitcoin. It's not massive. As you increase the pool size, so the next pool size up is 1 million sats. I'm going to have to remind myself now what the pool size fees are. So there's a 1 million sat pool, a 5 million sat pool, and a 50 million sat pool as well. And the fees increase with each one. But they are fixed. So if I was to enter the 5 million sat pool with 10 million sats, I would pay the same fee as if I was to enter the 5 million sat pool with 50 million sats. The fee does not move. So you're incentivized to mix larger amounts of Bitcoin at once because you pay every time that you enter the pool, if you like. And for those that are interested in kind of delving into the inner workings, or not the inner workings, but more of a high level look at Whirlpool, there's a guide on my website. So if you go to Bitcoiner.Guide/Whirlpool, there's a sort of frequently asked questions there, and a sort of a 101 on the structure of it, how it works, and how you can get started with it. But you can absolutely just test this stuff out with a couple of dollars worth of Bitcoin. It's not a massive amount just to test it.
Cool. So let's say I was to do. So I'm definitely going to do some coin joining. If not for anything else, just the fact that I like playing around and learning new stuff about Bitcoin. But what would be the benefit for me? Having the KYC Bitcoin, like what scenario am I evading by now doing a coin join? Could somebody, if somebody found out an address that I have Bitcoin in, like just a regular person, let's say I send someone some on-chain, an on-chain transaction, would they be able to sort of, if I haven't coin joined, track back the sats and see what other wallets has been in, and potentially like figure out how many Bitcoins I have or how many sats I hold?
Yeah, so let's use a scenario where you are you're sending me a donation. You do that from your cold storage wallet, and let's say you use you've got a fairly large UTXO or a piece of Bitcoin that you use to make that spend. Let's say it's a 20 million sat UTXO, and you send me 20,000 sats just to say thanks for your help with the website. Here's a little tip. So obviously I see that transaction land in my wallet. I can go onto a public block explorer, or I can look at my own and say, hey, Gandalf paid me. He kindly tipped me 20,000 sats, but I can see the UTXO that he paid me from is quite a large UTXO. So I know that he's got the best part of 20 million sats in his wallet. So number one, I've learned that you have a significant amount of Bitcoin in your wallet. That might make me somewhat interested in trying to find out where you live. So from there, so I know that little bit of information about you. Let's say now you go onto a known darknet market and you want to buy some weed because you like to chill out on a Friday night. If that the address that, and you buy with Bitcoin and you pay with the same piece of Bitcoin the change from the donation that you made to me, I could obviously, it's trivial for me to see after you've paid me where that Bitcoin goes next on the blockchain. And if I can work out that, well, that address has been used loads, I know that that's a darknet market address. I know then that you like to dabble in some herb on a Friday night. Obviously, that might not be an issue for me to know that about you, but let's switch me out for your employer or your nan. Do you see where it can kind of go in terms of you making an honest donation to me? From then I can see, I've got an idea of how much Bitcoin you've got, and I can see where you're spending from then onwards.
Absolutely.
So let's say after you donate to me, you then go into a coin join before you go to the darknet market to buy your weed. I'm going to see that change output go back to your wallet after you made the donation. Then I'm going to see that you've gone into a coin join. After that, I haven't got a clue. You could be any one of 5 people that are on the output side of that transaction. And if you mix more than once, I'm screwed. You could be 25 people now, or if you remix a couple of times, you could be 100 people. Do you see how it kind of grows exponentially, and you just kind of cover your tracks essentially, so that after that donation, I haven't got a clue where you've gone after that with that piece of Bitcoin.
Yeah. So that's really interesting to hear all of that, because it sounds like understanding UTXOs is quite an important part of using Bitcoin privately. Would I be correct in that statement?
Yes, absolutely. I'll use another analogy that might be a bit closer to home to people, because there's probably people listening to this going, well, I don't buy stuff off the darknet, so why do I need to worry? Let's say you get paid in Bitcoin and your salary is £2,000 a month. Your employer sends you your wages in Bitcoin at the end of the month. That'll be that would land in your wallet as a single piece of Bitcoin. Again, they know which piece of Bitcoin they've paid you. So anytime if you go and do your food shop, if you go and you buy your girlfriend something nice, or you go to a restaurant, they can see all of those spends, so they can essentially start to build up a picture of, where you're spending your wages, basically. So that's not something that I aspire for my employer, as good as they are. I don't really want the CEO of my company to know where I spend my wages. That's not the norm now in the legacy system. So why should it be the norm in a Bitcoin world? So this is where CoinJoin enables you to just have some kind of freshly minted Bitcoin, if you like, that's got no traceable history that you can spend where you see fit. Because let's say you go to a specific retailer that your employer doesn't agree with and doesn't like you spending at, that they could see that on chain, and they could start asking questions of you. And, do you really want your employer dictating where you can and cannot spend your wages? That should be up to you, and it should be private.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I learned about how traceable and how seemingly transparent Bitcoin is by listening to your episode of Citadel Dispatch, the most recent one with Matt Odell. But so it just got me thinking to this, like, at the beginning, Bitcoin had this reputation for being an anonymous digital currency, which, you could use to pay for like weird shit on the dark web, and, couldn't be traced back to you. So how have we ended up in a situation where it now seems that Bitcoin is almost less, something that was called like an anonymous private digital currency that you can do crazy shit with, illegal stuff. How have we ended up in a place where like now it seems like anyone with a little bit of knowledge of how to use a block explorer and a little bit of understanding of how Bitcoin works can figure out like, where you spend your money and how much you have? Like, how have we gone from that to this?
Well, two things. Number one, the normalization and the absolute creep of KYC. Basically, it's the default now for people to sign up to a KYC exchange, buy some Bitcoin, and have that Bitcoin tagged to their name. That is the default way that people come into the space, and it's the way I came into the space. I bought my first sats on Coinbase. So that, coupled with, if you, let's say 95% of people entering the space are tagging their Bitcoin to their personal identity. All of these exchanges share information. They're all, most of them are in bed with law enforcement, unfortunately. So that's the first, sort of shot in the kneecap of Bitcoin, unfortunately, in terms of privacy. And I guess the other thing as well is the proliferation of chain analysis firms. There's big money in this, in terms of any of these regulated exchanges want to be seen to be doing all they can to stop, quote unquote, money laundering, terrorism, blah, blah, blah. So they all pair up with chain analysis firms who've built, quite detailed tracking tools, so that they can put probability on, any transaction on the blockchain. They can put a probability of, did Bitcoin change hands? Did Bitcoin change hands here, or did it? Do we think that this is just like kind of like a self transfer? Is Gandalf withdrawing from Coinbase and he's sent to his cold storage wallet? They use kind of what's known as heuristics, where they sort of look at different traits of the transaction to try and glean what's actually gone on, because the underlying principle of the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, hasn't changed. It's just address A sends to address B. That there is no name at that level. The name is at step one, where people are entering the space, unfortunately, which is contributed to the somewhat surveillance ability of the network. So tools like CoinJoin and being able to procure your Bitcoin through sources where you don't have to provide any personal information, like earning or peer-to-peer exchanges or mining, are really, really important. And it's why people, privacy advocates like myself and loads of the other people that sort of swim in my circles, try to shout as loud as they can about.
Yeah, I think most people don't realize this, so it's an important thing to highlight, just how easy it is for someone to track you and find out a lot of information about you if you're not careful and not aware of this sort of thing. So for example, if somebody was So, because I'm familiar with some of the, I recently started like looking at multi-sig solutions, and I'm familiar with a few of the companies that do multi-sig, like Casa or Unchained Capital, and I know you can also set up your own. But from what I understand, like one of the main differences between an Unchained Capital and a Casa is that I understand Casa's doesn't KYC you, whereas Unchained Capital does. So if you had, for example, your cold storage Bitcoin on a multi-sig vault with Unchained Capital, and you were coin joining and sending it back to that vault, it would be pointless to coin join because you're sending it back to a KYC'd address. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure on the intricacies of the levels of information you have to provide. I know you're absolutely right with Unchained Capital where they KYC you at the door. I think Casa do as well, but I think they do provide an option where you can sign up to their base level tier pseudonymously with just an email, I believe, but I haven't tried it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If you even if, let's say, you're mining sats and you want to put it in an Unchained Capital vault, which is, don't get me wrong, these solutions fill a gap in the market in terms of being able people to secure their Bitcoin and remove, a single point of failure. So they're a great option for that. But if let's say you're mining or you're buying from an OKYC exchange and sending it into that wallet, then you're kind of wasting your time from a privacy perspective, because Unchained Capital, as great as they are, they're a regulated entity that, could be subpoenaed by a government to provide a list of their customers in the event, of the doomsday scenarios that we talked about before, that, self-custody is banned and outlawed, or we, God forbid, have a 6102 style event or something like that. These sorts of regulated exchanges or regulated collaborative custodians are going to be the first on the list that the government goes to say, you've got a nice big fat list of Bitcoiners. Can I see it, please?
Yeah. That's so. My introduction to multi-sig was through exploring options with these like collaborative custodians, and they do have their benefits as well. Like, if something was to happen to you and your family has no idea how to use Bitcoin, there's someone there to guide you, as opposed to if you set something up yourself. But I think, yeah, if it sounds like if you really want to be or increase your privacy, you have to stop using any sort of custodial service. Even if it's like a collaborative multi-sig custodian, you have to learn how to set up your own. Stop leaving coins on exchange or sending them to addresses where like your identity is tied to. And I think I should highlight that none of this is about like evading taxes or avoiding, breaking the law. I think it's just like we all have a right to not have to like have our entire, all our personal information on display for anyone to see for whatever reason that they think at the time. I think, we should all be expected to follow the law, pay our taxes. You can choose where you live mostly. So if you don't like it, you should go somewhere else. But it's not about evading, tax avoidance or doing anything illegal. It's just like basic privacy. And we do know like governments aren't always acting in our best interests. So it's good to have a buffer to where like if a government goes a bit rogue, that you're not like the lowest hanging fruit in terms of them doing something crazy.
Yeah, definitely. Central bank digital currencies are looming. It looks like they are going to come in eventually. The consequences of which are probably not understood by the mass of the population, but essentially they're going to provide absolute surveillance to central banks, where they can control how much money you have, where you spend it. We've even seen in China where they're putting expiry dates on money as well, so they can enforce when you spend it as well. So it's really quite scary. So I think Bitcoin, if used properly, provides a peaceful way that you could opt out of a system like that. Like, you're absolutely right. I'm not advocating for people to break any laws. You're free to do so if you want. But this is about just having the opportunity to opt out, and having private Bitcoin and using it privately, in my opinion, is the best way to be able to opt out.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Okay. Getting into storing Bitcoin and wallets. So I want to set up a multi-sig, and I've actually enjoyed trying all wallets. So I've tried like a Trezor, a Cold Card, a Ledger, and I'm just going to get into building my own seed signer and a Spectre DIY. And I'd like to also check out the Foundation device's Passport. So are you able to talk me through, the features of the Foundation device's Passport and how it's different to some of the wallets I've already tried, like the Cold Card, the Ledger, and the Trezor?
Yeah, so Passport, again, full disclosure for anybody who skipped ahead, it is a company that I work for. So I'm just going to state my clear and obvious biases first. But Passport is a Bitcoin-only hardware wallet that has 100% air-gapped operation. So what we mean by that is that this is a device that physically cannot be connected by a cable to your computer. So why might that be a good thing? So most people, unfortunately, are not great at securing their computers, and most people's computers probably are infected with some form of virus or malware. So it's probably a good idea not to connect the device that controls the keys to your life savings to that malware infested device. So we've created in my opinion, a really beautiful device that enables you to manage, generate and store your Bitcoin private keys in an offline manner. And we also enable you the opportunity to interact with pretty much any wallet software that's on the market, which we can come onto in a sec. Where you can interact without needing to physically connect it to your computer. You can interact with your phone as well. We do that via the use of QR codes. So when you want to sort of sign a transaction, the wallet software that you choose, again, we're compatible with pretty much everything out there on the market. You can do so via just scanning QR codes back and forth. So rather than having to dig out your USB cable to plug your hardware wallet into your computer, or rather than having to do what I like to call the SD card shuffle, which is a feature that we do actually offer just as an option for those people that want to use that. We offer probably the simplest transaction signing process possible for the hardware wallets that are on the market today. And we've packaged all that in an interface and in a physical body that is what we like to think is really approachable and very, very easy to use. So you're not going to have to read the manual from cover to cover to use this device. We pride ourselves on making being able to interact with your Bitcoin privately, sovereignly, and in an air-gap fashion in the easiest possible way. We do have significant and very detailed documentation, but we pride ourselves on the fact that 90% of our users don't need to use it because we create the product in such a way that it's very intuitive and enables people to keep their cold storage nice and safe and easy to interact with.
Yeah, it was actually the looking at the Passport that made me learn that you didn't have to plug a hardware wallet into a computer. I had a Cold Card already, but I didn't, and I thought that was like sort of, it's marketed as air-gapped, but I understand obviously by transferring an SD card over from the device to the computer, you're sort of still like mixing the two in a way. So I thought it was awesome to see that you could interact just via QR code with the Passport. And I also love the fact that it's kind of stealthy. You wouldn't, like if you saw a Trezor or a Ledger, Trezor is probably the least conspicuous one, I guess, if that's the right word. But like, it doesn't look like a USB stick. It doesn't look like anything else. Like, it's like a weird thing. A Ledger looks a bit like a USB stick, so it could pass for just like a USB stick. But the Passport is looks like a mobile phone sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of people say that it's quite analogous to the old Nokia rectangular shaped phones. It's got that sort of shape and feel to it. So it will look somewhat familiar to most people. But just on your point about the SD card, that is a feature that we offer similar to the cold card. And I think that does maintain the air gap, because it's not physically connected. Yes, you're putting the SD card from the hardware wallet device into the laptop, but you're in control of what files you're putting onto that SD card, and you can kind of you can audit that at any time. If there was anything, let's say your computer had some really weird bug where it tried to transfer a malicious file onto there, you'd see that instantly. So it provides an easy way to audit it. But yeah, absolutely, the best user experience for us is QR codes. You can sign a transaction in seconds. The great thing about us as well is that you don't even need a laptop to interact, or a computer to interact with your passport as well. We are compatible with two different mobile wallets that allow us to, you can manage your passport with Blue Wallet on your phone, and also Simple Bitcoin Wallet, which is a fairly new mobile wallet on the market. They just integrated the compatibility with Passport as well. So you can have that great QR code signing experience without the need to dig out your laptop so it's, again, we were talking before about user experience. We're increasingly moving into a mobile first world. And I think it's really important that we are interoperable with as many mobile wallets as we can. So that user experience, I'd be comfortable that even my mother could probably get her head around how to operate that. It's really quite intuitive and somewhat unique as well.
Okay, awesome. So to be clear, then I think I misconstrued the whole the SD card thing maybe not being as safe in terms of air gapping as a QR code, but really the main difference, assuming you don't put an infected file in the SD card without realizing, which would be a highly unlikely event, that it's just a user experience thing. Like, you don't have to take the SD card out and put it in a computer and put it back. You just you can just scan a QR code and that takes a couple of seconds. So that's sort of a UX upgrade rather than a security thing. Okay, awesome. And then, so for someone like me who's willing to dig deep and learn anything, and let's say, you're storing, let's say you're somebody like a super hardcore Bitcoin maximalist, you're Bitcoin only, your entire life savings is in Bitcoin. What would be your recommended way to store it? Would it be single sig? Would it be single sig with a passphrase? Would it be multi-sig? What would you do? And also, like, if you can share, like, if it's a multi-sig, how many would you do? Like 2 of 3 or 3 of 5 or 6? And what devices you might recommend? Is it better to mix devices, or is it better to have, 3 or 5 passports?
So I always advise people to keep it as simple as they can for as long as they can. The sort of bare minimum sovereign sort of key storage that I recommend would be single sig with a passphrase. I think that approach is more than secure enough for 90% of people. Your average Joe isn't storing hundreds of thousands of dollars here. That they're putting away a couple $100 each month. So that sort of approach is going to be manageable. It's going to be approachable, and they're not going to have too many things that need to back up or to worry about if in an inheritance scenario where they are the Bitcoiner and nobody else in the family understands what's going on. If you've got a really elaborate security setup, then the chances are that if you disappear tomorrow, then so is your Bitcoin. Nobody's going to be able to recover it unless you've got those steps in place and somebody that knows what to do and where to find all your stuff. So single sig plus passphrase is a really great approach, and it's very versatile. You can have your hardware wallet in a safe at home, have your seed words stored somewhere secure, close to home, if not at home. And then you can keep the passphrase somewhere separate in a robust method, hopefully stamped into some metal, off-site, maybe at a family member's house, that you don't need the utmost trust in them, because if they figure out what this passphrase is, they still can't do anything with just that. They still need your seed words. And equally, flip it on its head, if somebody was to break into your house, if they get just the seed words, they still they can just access that empty wallet. They still need the passphrase, which might be at your aunt's house, maybe. So it provides a good level of protection from most of the common sort of attack vectors. And it's, I say, felt relatively simple to set up, and most of the decent hardware wallets also all support a passphrase as well. If you wanted to take it a little bit further, and let's say you're slightly more well off, and you wanted to, you're getting into the realms of storing a bit of wealth that you're not comfortable keeping on a single device, let's say, then multi-sig, DIY multi-sig, or sovereign multi-sig, if you like, is a great approach that is getting easier with tools like Sparrow and Spectre that are coming out, that are making the coordination of these types of wallets much easier, and also the backup as well. So my personal recommendation there would be, again, trying to keep it as simple as possible, would be a 2 of 3 setup. So where you use 3 hardware devices to set up a multi-sig wallet, where you need any 2 of those devices to sign off on any spends. So the main attack vector here that sort of setup protects against is if somebody was to break into your house and hold you at gunpoint, then just having one of those keys in your house isn't enough to be able to create a transaction. So instead of just breaking into your house and being able to get away with some of your Bitcoin, now they need to break into your house, get you to cough up where one of your devices is. They then need to march you to wherever the second location is to get to the second device to create a valid spend. So most attackers are going to go for the low hanging fruit, and as soon as they understand that this is, you don't physically have the means to spend from that wallet just in your house, that hopefully they're going to give up on that. And so it's that next level, that next step up in terms of protection.
Yeah.
Now it does come with some caveats. You've now got 3 devices and 3 seeds for those devices that you've got to secure. So have you got 3 secure locations to keep those in? Most people probably not. Some people might. Do you use a bank? Do you use your cousin's house? Do you use your father-in-law's house? You've got to consider carefully where you keep all these devices. If you keep them too far apart, that's going to be really secure because they're nowhere near each other. But if you want to make a spend once a week, that's going to be a massive pain in the arse for you to go round to 2 of those locations to get the sign-in devices, so that you can create that transaction. So there's a balance to be had, and again, it's a very personal one. So it's not for me to tell anybody listening to this where they should keep those devices, because it's very personal and everybody's got different options available to them. But it's something worth considering. The final consideration is is inheritance. You might be a really interested Bitcoiner that's keen on learning, and you set up a really secure 2 or 3 multi-sig. You've got those keys distributed. Then you're walking to the shop tonight, you get hit by a bus, and your wife and kids are, you've left them a fortune. Are they going to know, number 1, where those keys are? Number 2, what they need to do with them? Number 3, the password to your laptop to be able to get into the wallet software. The likelihood is, for most people, no, probably not. So the easy or the sort of de facto answer to that is, well, I'll just leave them some instructions. But then those instructions become a threat vector in themselves, because if somebody finds those instructions, that's kind of a treasure map to all of your keys and to where your backups are. So it's that there isn't an easy answer or a sort of de facto recommendation for everybody. There's a lot of things to weigh up, caveats to think about, and trade-offs to consider before you make this quite a big decision, really, especially when it comes back to the inheritance piece that I've just run through. So my advice would be, keep it simple for as long as you can. And when you make that shift up to multi-sig, tread very, very carefully, do lots and lots of practice, and make sure that you think about the inheritance side of things, because that's often overlooked in my experience.
Yeah, that's the keep it simple for as long as possible, I think, is great general advice. And then, as you said, it becomes difficult to give a specific, one-size-fits-all best solution, because it really can depend on the user themselves. I think if you go too advanced for your own ability, you become a vulnerability to your security setup, because user error is a factor. There's no solution that's immune to you messing something up, and the more complicated you go without the required knowledge and understanding, the more likely it is that you will be the one that's messing it up and potentially ending up with like you losing your coins. And then of course, with inheritance,
more people. Sorry, go on.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, far more people will screw themselves out of their own Bitcoin or lose their own Bitcoin than will get hacked from any of the, or have it stolen through the theoretical attack vectors that I've just run through, which is why, again, it comes back to just keeping it simple, because you're far more likely to lose it or screw something up when you're coordinating a multi-sig setup than you are to be somebody to hit you over the head with a hammer and say, give me all your Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. And then in terms of somebody, so this is something I thought about a lot for myself. And so I've been scared of the single sig plus passphrase because I've read so many horror stories of people forgetting their passphrase, but that's obviously like a backup issue. So it would lead me to think that if you can sort of hold 2 copies of your seed and 2 copies of your passphrase, you maybe avoid the whole forgetting the passphrase. But then you're looking at 4 different locations in terms of like where you store those backups, because you obviously don't want to store a passphrase and a seed together, because it doesn't eliminate the single point of failure in terms of somebody being able to like $5 wrench attack you if those are both in the same location and they can easily gain access to them. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got a single sig plus a passphrase, you need both of those together to recreate the wallet. So keeping them together in the form of metal seed backups is absolutely pointless, because the whole point is that the passphrase is that final layer of protection, that if your seed is compromised, they still get an empty wallet, they still need your passphrase. So absolutely keep them separate. Just to circle back with the backup option, another great option, which is something that we at Passport Foundation, that the Passport device offers, is encrypted SD card backups. Now, while these shouldn't be, in my opinion, used on their own, you should still stamp your seed word into metal. But what you can also do is create an encrypted backup on a tiny little micro SD card that is a backup of your private key that you can store multiple copies of wherever you wanted, really. You keep them at families' houses. You could give a little SD card to your mum and just say, can you keep this for me? If she was to look at the contents of that SD card, it's encrypted with a password. So while the password to sort of decrypt this micro SD card is something else that you need to remember, it's on Passport, it's 6 words long. You can create multiple backups with that same password. So by remembering an additional 6 words to decrypt this this micro SD card, or again stamping them into metal and keeping them separately, you can create multiple SD card backups. So you could have one at your mum's house, one at your sister's house, where they can't break into that. The encryption is very, very strong, but it's just an extra layer of protection that, if you were to lose your seed backup, then you've got your encrypted backups in 2 different locations where you could just draw on that instead to recover your wallet as well. So another great option that's much, much easier to store, because if somebody sees a metal seed backup, it's essentially in clear text. So it doesn't take a genius, as Bitcoin continues to grow in adoption, what that sort of piece of metal is, it's a Bitcoin backup that's going to become common knowledge in the not too distant future. Whereas a micro SD card could be anything. It could have photos on it. It could have, videos or files or anything on it. So if somebody was to find it and put it into the computer, they'd have to break the encryption, which, to this day, nobody's been able to do. So another great option worth considering for the hardware wallets that offer that sort of thing.
Awesome. That's something I didn't know. So that's excellent to know. And as you said, like an SD card is very unsuspecting, whereas a metal plate with 12 or 24 words stamped into it, like what else could that be, really? So great advice. Cool. Let's just as we finish up, I want to just quickly get your get your thoughts on nodes. So why should somebody run their own node as opposed to trust someone else's node? And maybe tell us what node implementations you use in case somebody wants to get started with running a node.
Yeah, so I'll try and keep it fairly brief. As Bitcoiners, we're here to remove trusted third parties. So we buy Bitcoin because we don't trust central banks to not inflate our savings away. Great. So to carry on down that that same thought process, whenever you take part in a transaction on the Bitcoin network, you are doing so through a node. Now, if you don't have your own node, you're doing that through somebody else's node. That is a mantra that's been said time and time again. So to break that down, essentially, if you just have a phone wallet and you're just starting out in the space, you are connecting to somebody else's node. 9 times out of 10, it will be the node that is provided by the wallet provider. So let's use Blue Wallet as an example. Blue Wallet will run their own node. If you just download the app and you receive some Bitcoin, you're doing that through their own node. What their node is doing is telling your wallet the current state of the wallet, how much Bitcoin is in that. So there's a certain level of trust there that you're trusting the node that is provided by Blue Wallet to tell you the correct balance of your Bitcoin. By running your own node, you remove that trust within Blue Wallet. If you were to connect your Blue Wallet to your node, essentially you are trusting your own hardware and software to tell you the state of your wallet and to be able to broadcast transactions out to the state of the network. So at a very, very high level, it's just about removing trusted third parties so that you can be that you can take that next step in terms of sovereignty. So there's many ways that you can run a node. They range from as simple as downloading Bitcoin Core or Spectre Desktop onto your computer, clicking a few buttons, and it will all do it for you. You can get started in literally 5 minutes. Then you can move on, if you want some more functionality, but you don't want to increase the complexity. There are various what are colloquially called plug and play nodes where one of the node providers will send you some pre-built hardware that is a similar sort of size to your internet router. Generally, you can plug that into your internet router, plug it into some power, and that will chug away and sort of act as your own node. Or the final option is that you can build one yourself on some hardware that you bought, and then you can install the software on it, which sounds really, really technical, but these node projects, which I'll come onto in a sec, have made the user experience really, really easy for people, even non-technical people, to be able to build this themselves using, generally they'd run on what are known as single board computers, such as a Raspberry Pi. So you'd buy the hardware from Amazon, cost you like $150, $200, get yourself a hard drive, put it all together in a couple of minutes, literally. Download your chosen software, and that will kind of chug away in the corner of your bedroom or your lounge, and you can connect any number of wallets to that to be able to interact with the Bitcoin network in a more sovereign manner, so that you don't need to trust anybody else to tell you the current state of all of your wallets. In terms of node projects that I use, I actually run 3 nodes at the moment, which is absolutely is not required. So anybody listening to this, don't think that you need to run 3 nodes. I just have a habit of enjoying tinkering, much like yourself, Gandalf, and I just like to see what all of the different projects have to offer. So we talked about CoinJoin earlier, and I have a dedicated node called a Ronin Dojo, which you can learn more about at ronindojo.io. That's kind of like a very samurai-focused, privacy-focused node. So I run one of those. I also run a Raspberry Blitz, which is somewhat more of a Lightning Network-focused node for when I'm tinkering with Lightning, that side of things. And more recently, literally in the last couple of weeks, I've been building my own sort of DIY node on sort of some more premium hardware, which, again, is a fair bit more technical. I've done it as a bit of a learning experience. I've been following a great guide from Catan, from Ministry of Nodes, who everybody should go and check out as well. So yeah, in terms of the common ones, Ronin Dojo and Raspberry Blitz are my favorites. Not only because of the services that they offer, but because they are both truly free and open source projects as well. So very much aligned with my personal ethos and, of course, the Bitcoin ideology of being free and open source.
Awesome. It's good to hear that you're running a Ronin Dojo and a Raspberry Blitz. I've got all of the hardware to build one of each of those. So those are going to be the two nodes that I'm going to run as well, because I want to play around with Lightning. And I definitely also want to do some coin joining and get familiar with that. So it's nice to hear that someone like yourself is also running those two node implementations. And yeah, keep us posted on how it goes with this other third premium node. I suspect I will eventually also run another node because I'll want to try maybe. I've heard so much about Umbrel and how smooth of a user experience it is, but I know there's also issues with it not quite being open source. There's some controversy that I don't quite understand there, but I know that there's something there. So.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Umbrel offer a great product, and in terms of like a really polished user interface, they've done a very, very good job at that. They do suffer from. There's a lot of features packaged in with it, and my personal opinion, my non-technical opinion, is that I get the impression that because there's so much packed into it, sometimes if you're running a lot of things on a really low-powered piece of kit like a Raspberry Pi, it has its limits, and I think if you switch everything on, you're probably going to run into issues, which is why I like to use the more focused products where, Raspberry Blitz is really, really good at Lightning, so I just use it for that, and Ronin Dojo is really, really good at Samurai Wallet and CoinJoin. Again, not a requirement. Don't feel like you need to run multiple. It's just because I'm sort of further down that rabbit hole that I want to sort of maintain a more focused approach, I guess.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there because I know you have a hard stop at 11, and I just want to say I really, really appreciate the time. Hopefully, all the everyone listening's learned a lot. You're a endless book full of Bitcoin privacy and technology, and there's so much more stuff that we that we can cover. I mean, you can go down several rabbit holes on each of the topics we covered, but I'll encourage everyone to go and check out on Bitcoiner.Guide, there is a page where you have listed all the other podcasts you've been on. So I would encourage for anyone who wants, who got a taste and wants to go dive deeper down the rabbit hole, just go listen to all the podcasts with Bitcoin Q&A on them. And I encourage everyone to also go check you out on Twitter and follow you. Your handle is @BitcoinQ_A. Is that right?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. And thank you for the reminder on the podcast list as well. I need to update that today. So thank you for the nudge. Yeah.
You've featured on some awesome podcasts. So, there's a lot more that people can learn. So this is just a brief introduction. And I encourage everyone to dive deeper and get into the nitty-gritty details by listening to other stuff. But mate, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Take care, man. Speak soon.